Hello everyone, today I'm here to talk about the Anglican Church and the history behind this form of religion. To start in brief words, Anglicanism is basically the identity of the Church of England, following the English Reformation, and now let's explain it. The Church of England's earliest origins date back to the Roman Catholic Church influence in Europe during the 2nd century. However, the Church's official formation and identity are typically thought to have started during the Reformation in England of the 16th century. Anglicanism is a tradition within Christianity, comprising the Church of England and churches which are historically tied to it have similar beliefs, worship practices, and church structures. With a membership estimated at around 80 million members worldwide, the Anglican faith is the third largest Christian communion in the world after the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox churches. The Anglican faith is often considered a Reformed Catholicism, a hybrid between a Catholic and a Protestant faiths. The Anglican Communion is an international association of churches consisting of the Church of England and the national and regional Anglican churches in full communion with that mother church. The status of full communion means that there is mutual agreements on essential doctrines and that full participation in the sacramental life of each church is available to all communicants of Anglicanism. There are also groups such as those aligned with the continuing Anglican Movimentum, the Anglican Realignment, whose relationship to the worldwide Anglican community is still being negotiated. Okay, now let's talk Henry VIII. Famous for his many wives, he broke ties with the Pope in the 1530s after the Catholic Church wouldn't allow him to annul his marriage to his first wife, who was Catherine of Aragon, who failed to produce any male heirs. Therefore, the king didn't want to proceed with the marriage. Henry passed the Act of Succession and the Act of Supremacy, which essentially declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. Then, after Henry's death, Protestant reforms made their way into the church during the reign of Edward VIII. But when Edward's half-sister Mary succeeded the throne in 1553, she persecuted Protestants and embraced traditional Roman Catholical ideas again. Then, after Elizabeth I took the title of Queen in 1558, however, the Church of England was revived. The Book of Common Prayer and the 39 Articles of Religion became important texts that outline moral doctrine and worship principles until today, basically. The Church of England is an established church, and this means that the monarch is the supreme governor of the church. Also, the church has official functions with the state, and consequently, the church and the state have a link. They are one, they work together. Today, the monarch, which is Elizabeth II, as we can see here in the picture, and we all know about her, retains the title of Defender of the Faith, and it is still the supreme governor of the church. She, as a monarch, has some duties such as approve the appointment of archbishops, bishops, and deans on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. Secondly, she has to formally open each new session every 5 years of the General Synod, the church governing body. And finally, she has to promise to maintain the church on her coronation oath. Now let's talk more about the Church of England. The Church of England is part of the Anglican Communion, as we have seen before. The Church claims to be both Catholic and Reformed. It unfolds teachings found in early Christian doctrines, such as the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed. And the church also reverses 16th century Protestant Reformation ideas outlined in texts such as the 39 Articles and the Book of Common Prayer. Then the Church of England sustains a traditional Catholic order system that includes the ordained bishops, priests, and deacons. And the church follows an episcopal form of government. Basically, the church is divided into provinces that will be analyzed in just a couple of seconds, which are the Canterbury and York. These provinces are separated in dioceses, which are headed by bishops and include some parishes. Then it is important to mention that the Archbishop of Canterbury is thought to be the most senior cleric in the church. Finally, the church bishops play a lawmaking role in Britain, and this is very important because 26 bishops sit in the House of Lords and are referred to as the Lords Spiritual. So, the Church of England is an actual phenomenon. 9.4 million people visit a Church of England cathedral every year. I mean, not only members of the communion, the Anglican communion, go to these cathedrals to celebrate their religion, their beliefs, but also people from all over the world travel to witness these ceremonials, these architectural places that are unbelievable, just to know more about this form of religion that Anglicanism is. So, the Church of England is the established or state church in England. As I've said before, we are now going to see the two provinces in which the Church of England is divided. This one being the Canterbury Cathedral in the south of England, with Rowan Williams as the Archbishop, being the most important cathedral of the in England territory. Following, we have the Westminster in the north, with John Sentamu as the Archbishop, which is the most important cathedral in the north part of the territory. Okay, now moving on to beliefs and worships of the Anglican Church. According to the Holy Trinity Anglican Church, the worships that the Anglican Communion stands by are centered around the active participation of hearing and responding to God's Word through worship, prayers, confessions, fellowships with Christ in Holy Communion. Worship at Holy Trinity Anglican is biblically based and shaped by the Book of Common Prayer and the Church here. The Church of England has a widespread of beliefs that are important to mention that are significant to the Anglicanism itself. And they are a belief that the Bible contains the core of all Christian faith and thought, a loyalty to a way of worship and life that was first set out in the Book of the Common Prayer, celebration of the sacraments ordained by Jesus, that of baptism, Eucharisty, or Holy Communion, finally a way of Christian thinking that involves scripture, tradition, and reason held together in creative tension. These are the main beliefs, and as we can see, the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer is present throughout the whole presentation because it is something that is really important for them since the Reformation, mainly the Book of Common Prayer. Now, let's talk about the evolution over time. It's the normal course of life. Things have to develop and be updated to the time we are living, and the church is no exception. Therefore, there are some issues, of course. And the Church of England is responsible for more than 16,000 churches and 42 cathedrals in England. Yet, the number attending services has been in decline in recent decades. Therefore, the problem we have here is the decrease of attendance. In 2002, the average number of people attending church on Sundays declined by 4% to just over a million. Many of those attending are of the older generations, with statistics showing that few from 15 to 30-year-olds go to church. I mean, this isn't a real problem because we know that younger generations are the future, and we can see here a tendency of losing religion and losing these beliefs that may be important to their family's culture or even the country culture, which is very determined by this religious history and their own creation of their own religion doctrine. But moving on to better developments, in recent years, women and homosexuals were given the opportunity to participate in the church leadership roles, which is a strong and important development, mainly in the days that we live in now. Giving opportunity to everyone and spreading the religion to everyone, not only men being the ones always in charge, in my opinion, is a great development. But explaining a bit about the context of these improvements, I would say that in 1992, when General Synod passed a vote to ordain women, not everyone in the Church of England was in agreement. And in 1993, it passed the Act of Synod, setting up an official structure to enable parishes to refuse women's ministry. Then, in 1994, in Bristol, the first women priests were ordained. Now, more than 10 years on, 1 in 5 churches of England licensed priests is female. Nowadays, pressure is growing to allow women to be bishops. Then, finally, talking about the topic of homosexuality, many of the headlines regarding the Church of England since 2002 have regarded the rights of homosexual priests. The Church of England allows the ordination of gay priests as long as they are celibate. Speaking a little bit about how Anglicanism is spread around the world. Although joined in the global communion, Anglicanism has no international juridical authority, and each province is wholly self-governing. The 34 provinces, 4 United Church and 6 other churches of the Anglican Communion, are autonomous, each with their own governing bishop and governing structure. Some take form of national churches, such as in England, Canada, and Japan, while others are collection of nations, such as in Central Africa, Africa or South Asia, or geographical regions, such as Vanuatu or Solomon Islands. Some churches are extra-provincial, for example, Bermuda aligns with Canterbury, or outside the Anglican community altogether. Also, there are interchurching relations of the Anglican community, those being the Lusitanian Catholic Apostolic Evangelical Church here in Portugal, the Mar-Thoma Syrian Church in India, the Philippine Independent Church, and finally the Spanish Reformed Episcopal Church. Nevertheless, many of the early American colonists were Anglican Puritans. During the colonial era, the Anglican Church set up an establishments in Virginia, New York, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and finally in Georgia. After the American Revolution, the Anglican Church became an independent organization in the United States and called itself the Protestant Episcopal Church. To conclude, this church has been a self-governing body since 1785 and has about 1.9 million members. With this, I conclude my presentation. I hope I have give you useful and interesting information, and thank you.